understand that?
Hey, what's up, everybody? We're here with Chris Vos of the record company. So excited to have you, sir. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us about your upcoming appearance here in Syracuse.
Thanks so much, Scott. It's my pleasure to be on the air on WAQX, man.
Excited, man. This is your first time back to Syracuse since 2017. You're headlining Friday night of the New York State Bluesfest, which is happening at Chevy Court on the New York State Fairgrounds. Tickets are available now at nysbluesfest.com. And I got to say, man, it has been a long 7 years since you have graced our fair city, and we are stoked to have you back.
Well, that's great to hear. It's been too long, like you say. There was a little interruption that we don't have to go too deep into here, but yeah, otherwise, I'm sure we would have been back earlier. One of the great challenges of being a group is just trying to get back to places you love. I grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, and the closest city was Milwaukee. So Milwaukee probably had the same thing as Syracuse, where we would always, as kids, talk about it's like, hey, where are these bands? Why don't they drop into Milwaukee? Why are they always going to Chicago? So
Right,
we
right.
sometimes have to go down to Chicago, but it's always great to come in cities like Syracuse because fans are diehard and people really love music. So that's great stuff. Can't wait to come back, man.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up Wisconsin because I labored under the delusion for a very long time that you guys were just a California band, born and bred. I read an interview with you from, I believe it was the Milwaukee newspaper, where they dove into your roots in Wisconsin. And then everything that I had thought about the band kind of made more sense because for me, there was always this juxtaposition because there's a California vibe to what you guys do for
Sure.
sure, right?
Sure.
Like there's no
Yeah.
doubt about that. But there was also sort of like this kind of homespun Midwest thing, a lot of it in the lyrics, that just kind of made my brain go, that man, it's weird. I feel like they're not all from California. And to find out that you were born and bred in Wisconsin made the record company make a lot more sense to my music brain.
Yeah, man. No, that makes sense. That's one of the reasons I started talking about it a little bit more because people will be like, I can't believe you're in a Los Angeles band. And I get it. I followed a girl out here. That's how I ended up in LA and my wife. So, it, when I got here, I would, sticks and strings are what I like to play music with, no discrediting or disparagement to anybody, but that's my preferred modus operandi. So growing up on a dairy farm, it was like polkas and and my grandpa Don was polkas and country western music, and my dad was country and western music. My dad was rock and roll. Spent a lot of time out in the fields, and we had a cab tractor with a cassette deck, and I'd sit up there and listen to like the Boss or listen to like Creedence, the Dubes, Bob Seger, Genesis, all that stuff with Dad, and Ma loved Motown. So, bringing all of that farm, like rural background, I went to Milwaukee and then I moved to LA, met my wife in Milwaukee and then moved to LA. So, I think that shines out in the music. And then the other two guys are actually one guy's from Philadelphia and the other guy's from upstate New York. So long story short, we all come from different places and just kind of found each other here. But I'm happy to get that story out about the background because I think it does, there's an earthiness to what we do and there's a rawness to what we do and there's a do-it-yourself thing. We've made our most successful records in our own living room, mixing and mastering and, well, not mastering, but mixing them a lot of times ourselves, producing them, our bass player, Alex himself. And that all comes from that root of growing up on a farm where, your best friends are your brothers because you can't even ride a bike to the neighbor's house. That's how secluded my upbringing was. I had 4 kids in my first grade class, all of which were boys. That's kind of grew up in a time warp. So that's where that element comes into the music. And I love it because lived amongst, my dad is a farmer. My brothers are both farmers. So I understand and respect what it takes to work in rural communities. And now I've lived in the city and I understand a lot about what's going on out here too, and that all goes into the music.
Absolutely. And I think that there is a certain juxtaposition to the art that you produce that definitely speaks to that, right? Like the band in LA that didn't really grow up in LA, right? Like, because we all kind of have like a certain vision of LA, whether
Sure.
it's from like our era with like the Motley Crues of the world, or in modern days, right? Like kind of like hipster stuff. So it definitely speaks to your roots and your bandmates' roots to what these records sound like. The most recent is called the fourth album, which I adore. It gave us Talk to Me and Dance on Mondays, which were big singles for you guys. It almost felt like a back to basics thing. And from what I've researched a little bit, you actually did do this one kind of all on your own, self-contained by the band, sort of went back to the living room.
We did. We did, and it was a great natural feeling. We learned a lot through the process of making four records, really five. We put out a early songs and rarities record, which was even earlier recordings than our first record. So like from 2012, 13, 14. So those are really raw. Those are out there too. So there are essentially five records out there, and we did an online EP during the whole, you know, thing that was going on a few years ago. But yeah, man, the roots of everything. It's important to cling to what you believe in and who you are as an artist. But it's also important to evolve. And I think it's we to have, you can't live in the past. We've never tried to recreate, though it may shine through that our influences may come from bygone eras, we still make music in the present. So you have to live in your current state and do what feels best now, and you take all those influences with you. And for us, it just feels good to bake your own cookies, man. Feels good to flip your own pancakes and market your own, if I was going to use the farmer analogy, which I don't want to use to death, but you got to grow. My dad is a successful farmer, family farmer, not a corporate farmer, a family farmer, and the reason he is because he walks into the middle of his field. He doesn't just look at it from the roadside. He sees what's happening on the inside. He goes and he gets to know every animal, every piece of machinery, every number on a piece of paper. That man knows. And I think as a band, we've just kind of have learned that in this modern era, the more you depend on outside people to do that work, unless you're a huge pop sensation, which is not our destiny. When you're a hardworking roots band, um, you have to, the more you have your hands in the dirt, the better you have an understanding of what's going to happen, you know?
I think that also speaks to the relationship you guys have with your audience, right? Because the people that love the record company, right? Like,
Yeah, there's some good people out there, man.
absolutely, man. And that's how, in my opinion, right? Like, you guys are one of those bands that just do it the right way, kind of like, the old school way. Not that I'm right, like crapping on modern things or anything, but when the music industry was thriving, when radio was thriving, artists
Mhm.
like yourselves would do little promo things and stop by, and regardless of whether it's a new artist, older artist, whatever, right? Like, and it's rare to have the ability to sit down and chat like this. And the fact that you guys are always willing to do these things,
Oh yeah.
I think speaks volumes about the success that you've had, the grassroots nature of the build, and the foothold, for lack of a better term, that you guys have within the genre or format, depending on where you're looking at it from.
Appreciate it, Scott. And I appreciate it. I think that, there is, you have I personally believe that I have a responsibility and the band has a responsibility as artists to respect and care for the time that people put into listening to your music, because it's time in their lives, whether it's 10 seconds or they play your stuff over and over and over and over again, all in between that spectrum. you know um we have one gentleman who's come to see us, become a good friend actually, because he's seen us so much. His name's Bruce. He's seen us 63 times. He's gone all over the United States. But then you also have like the listener who just listens for 10 seconds and maybe they click through, or they, it's not their thing, they flip the channel, they flip the station. Both did you a service. They gave you time, and that's a really precious thing. And I think the further we go in life, the more you learn that nobody owes, I don't think anybody owes me their time. If I work hard enough and make something good enough, that it hits the bullseye in your life and you say, you know what, I dig this, you're giving that artist a gift. And that is the power of a fan. And if within reason, an artist should be as respectful of that as they can be, because without the ears of the fans and they're mobilizing themselves out of their homes to come to your concert, there is no concert, there is no record. You're a hobbyist that is, not able to do this full time. So when you get to that point, I think it takes that mindset from the beginning and all the way through to establish consistency, because there are going to be peaks and valleys. If there's any younger artist listening, you will have peaks and valleys, probably a lot more valleys in the beginning than peaks. And you have to look to your own heart. And when somebody comes up to you after a show, if you had 3 people in the crowd, play it. Do never play, oh, there's only 3 people here. That is a disservice to your time and theirs. Play your guts out. You never know who's listening, but you also never know how many shows you got in your life, you know?
Brother, you are a breath of fresh air in an industry that is the most frustrating it's ever been. It's great to hear stuff like that. And right, like I feel the Wisconsin bleeding through in that sentiment, and it makes me happy. I'm so stoked on the success that you guys have had. I know that coming upon the 4th album was a bit of a trying time, but
Oh
uh,
yeah.
with that Midwest hard work ethic and the authenticity that you guys have always been known for, you've persevered and you've put out what I think is, man, a paramount album in your catalog. And I think it's just, I know that you at one point mentioned that it was like a book. I feel like it's more of a chapter, because I think that there's a lot more story to be written for the
Oh yeah.
record company. And man, I can't wait to see what the future holds for you guys.
Well, thank you. One thing I really appreciate all of that, Scott. The record was made through, coming out of the COVID stuff, and then this industry has changed. Some of it not for the easier. Um, if you look through history, it's funny to have a chapter now in my life where it's like signed, doing a good job, have 3 successful records, and then dropped because some new person comes into the label who I never have met, never talked to, and just dropped us like we'd never done any work together. And we had. And there were a lot of people from that label that are good friends of mine that reached out and were like, hey man, what the heck? I'm sorry. It's like, it's all good, dude. There's another thing that I've learned through time. I didn't agree with their decision. I respected it. They had a right to make it, but I didn't agree with it. And so it wasn't done. Nothing we wrote was to prove anything, except for that it's like, well, now here we are. What are we feeling? And this record is what we were feeling through all the experiences we had, trying to fight on and survive as a band after 4 years of not a lot of work to be done, not a lot of profits coming into anybody on any place. And a band at its core is an independent business. And it's not very sexy to say it that way, but that's what it is. It's people trying to make a living, and they're trying to make a living with ideas. And you just have to believe in your ideas. I don't need, I enjoy the vindication. I find it very inspiring. But when you're in that valley, if you can't inspire yourself, there's no chance for you in this business, because it is merciless and brutal, and art is beautiful. So it's worth fighting those battles. And if you do not relent and you do not quit, it will make you wiser and stronger. And I'm a student from here on out. I've got a lot more to learn.
Man, if we could start cloning human beings, I would start with you, because I think that
I'm going to tell my wife you said that.
after the first few sessions, I feel like we could definitely make a positive impact, not only in the world, but the music industry. And man, at this point, does it need it?
I said it to my buddy Bruce now, who's become a dear friend, the guy who's seen us 60 plus times. I said, Bruce, if I could clone 5,000 of you, I wouldn't even need to convince anybody else in the world. I'd be set.
Yeah. Well, the good part for you guys is that the music does the talking for you. It is one of the most earnest and heartfelt collections of songs. I think it really speaks to the term Americana, which we've kind of lost track of over the last sort of decade.
Mhm.
Um, and truthfully, there are very few authentic songwriters that still exist, and I think that you are near the top of that list. And I honestly can't wait to see you guys live at
Thank you.
Bluesfest. I think it's going to be something that Syracuse needs. It almost feels like we need this sort of like cleansing to bring some, for lack of a better term, some real American roots music to the people, because we haven't had a chance to do that since the end of the pandemic.
Well, let me say this. I appreciate you setting that up. And let me, being from Wisconsin, I did a lot of bowling. So you put the pins up, I'll knock a few over here. We're gonna throw down. Like I humble and try to be grounded, but on stage it's throwdown time. And the audience is not something people always say perform. I've even said this from stage, like people are like, perform to the audience. I'm like, I find that to be such a crock, because it's like you're not performing to an audience, you're participating in an experience with an audience, and an audience holds great sway over how a show goes. I guarantee you, unless you're up at like a echelon level where you're putting on a light, where it's so all consuming, and it's that there's no way that it might blur that line a little more. But at our level, you know, when there isn't these big light shows going on and there aren't these things happening, and when it's just about the music, it can be two people dancing that start a fire of soulfulness. And I've seen it time and time again, you know, and all I can promise you is I have one really sacred way I look at performing. And I learned it the hard way because I got some buddies who are not with me anymore, because and they had the same dream as mine. And that is play every show like it's one less time, not one more. And let that motivate you to go to the line. You'll heal up. You can figure out how to put yourself back together the next day. But play every show like it's one less time. And we're coming in. I think this is a one-off show, so I'll have nothing to do the next day. Skin my knees and yell on key a little bit and do some pretty stuff in between.
I love it, man. You in the last 15 minutes have become one of my favorite human beings on earth, man. For real.
Well,
Like
pleasure. Thank you. Must have been.
I've been in a rotten mood for days, and this conversation has literally put some wind into my sails and made me feel less awful about some things in my life. So I appreciate
Yeah,
you,
I can
Chris.
feel that too, man. I roll out of bed in the morning some days and I'm just like, man, we got a song on the new record called I Found Heaven in My Darkest Days, which is about that very thing, about waking up where the sunbeam comes through and hits your body and you're like, I don't want it. You know, I don't want to get up today. Not that you want to do anything bad, but it's just like, I don't see the point of why I should put in the effort. Well, there is a freaking point. There's always a point, folks. And it's worth fighting for, man.
Absolutely. And I think that's a
We
great
all
point
go through it though, brother. We all
oh,
go
yeah.
through it. You
It's
might
like
pick me up someday.
I say this to a lot of like the young people that I mentor is right. Like it's not the things that happen to you. It's how you respond to those things, right? It's less about the bad thing that happens to you, and it's more about how you rebound and what you learn from it, what you take going forward, right? Like I think there's too many people in the younger generations that are afraid to fail, not understanding that you have to fail in order to understand how best to move forward with whatever it is that you're doing. And I listen, if I've done 1,000 things, I've failed 950 times, right? But it's those 50 times that you succeeded that people are going to remember and will build your legacy. So you can't worry about all the times things didn't work, because ultimately they don't work all the time for everybody, right? Like turn off social media and everybody's best of reel, right? Because nobody posts their terrible days on social media. It's all a competition, and you've got to disconnect and live in the moment and take everything as it comes, and then just grow from every experience, good or bad, plain and simple.
And one thing I really believe in is that, and it was kind of something I learned through my dad, but it kind of, and my mom, you know, but it kind of evolved as time went on. I really grew into it, which was, you know, um, my wife and I talk about this all the time. I stopped using the word bad, and not because things aren't challenging. I use the word challenging. And you say, why does that matter? It does. Because bad is bad. Challenging, you go, today was challenging. It really was tough, but I'm here, man. And just like you say with failure, I always tie the word learned to failure. So like I learned something. It sucked, freaking hated it. I don't ever want to go through it again. But I learned something. I either learned something that I did wrong that I best not do again, something that somebody else did that taught me something about them. There's always something to pull forward. And I'm with you on all of that, bud.
I appreciate that, man. I can't thank you enough for your time today. I
Pleasure.
adored hanging out with you, dude. And the offer is open. If
Hey,
you've got time, when you're in town, you're more than welcome to come in the studio at any point. Come hang
come on
out,
over
come
and
say
say hello
hi.
at the show. Come on over and
And
say hello
well,
at the show.
I'll be out there for the show for sure. But offer stands if you guys want to come over, hang out at the building, kill a little bit of time. The offer is there. You're more than welcome anytime. And once again, the record company playing live, New York State Blues Fest, Friday, June 14th, Chevy Court at the New York State Fairgrounds. Tickets are available now. NYSBluesfest.com. Also on the bill over the course of those days, Little Feat, Shamika Copeland, and Little Ed in the Blues Imperials. Chris, thank you again for your time, brother. It was great getting to chat with you today.
Let's have some fun. See you soon.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks, brother. Take care.